So, what if I told you that the most radical, multi-million dollar real estate development happening in Montreal right now doesn't involve a single construction crane?
I mean, in this market, I'd probably say you were crazy.
Right. But it's true. It doesn't involve cranes, but it does involve thousands of pear trees and this massive citizen-led budget takeover.
Yeah, it's quite the shift.
Totally. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at a stack of municipal documents and reports we've pulled from the City of Montreal, wikiresidence.ca, and infodrone.ca.
Lots of really fascinating raw data in there.
Absolutely. And our mission today for you listening is to explore this quiet but just massive revolution happening in the borough of LaSalle. We are looking at how a major urban center is taking the concept of urban agriculture and, turning it from a quaint backyard hobby into a primary engine for urban development.
Yeah, because the documents from LaSalle, they really represent a complete uncoupling from traditional urban planning.
That's a-
Well, typically a city's growth is measured in, concrete, steel, glass. You pave over nature to create efficiency.
Right, the usual gray infrastructure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what we are seeing in this borough is a fascinating test case for the exact opposite approach. We're watching a municipality attempt to physically and socially alter a neighborhood using green infrastructure.
Which is wild to think about at this scale.
It is. They're treating tomatoes and fruit-bearing shrubs not as decoration, but as critical public utilities.
Okay, let's unpack this framework because it's a lot to wrap your head around. At the center of all these reports is this thing called the Local Nourishing Community Development Plan, or the PLDCN.
Right, the PLDCN.
Yeah, and this is tied directly to LaSalle's local ecological transition plan for 2025 to 2030.
Which is a very ambitious timeline, by the way.
Super ambitious. And the stated mission in these documents is to map out the territory's food reality and, ensure sustainable local food access.
Which sounds simple on paper, but is actually huge.
Right. I mean, framing food access as a municipal responsibility is a massive ideological shift. Usually a city, they provide the roads to get to the grocery store.
Sure, they paved the way.
Right. But they don't view the actual food inside the store as part of their infrastructure mandate.
No, they don't. And that phrase, food reality, is really the linchpin of this entire initiative.
Let's dig into that phrase a bit.
So by mapping a territory's food reality, urban planners are analyzing food access with the exact same rigorous geographic and demographic metrics they use for, say, the electrical grid.
Or like the water system.
Exactly. The water system, the sewers. They are looking at the physical space of the borough and asking how the actual square footage of public land can be retrofitted to generate calories for its population.
Generate calories? That's such a structural way to look at a park.
It completely changes the paradigm. It treats the urban landscape as an active producer of resources rather than just a passive consumer of goods shipped in from thousands of miles away.
Okay, but before we look at what is actually being planted in the soil, I think we have to follow the money.
Oh, always follow the money.
Right, because the scale of the investment is what moves this from a feel-good weekend community project into a true urban transformation.
The numbers are staggering.
They really are. So the City of Montreal initially set aside a $10 million participatory budget for what they designated as ecological nourishing zones.
And $10 million is already a massive injection of capital for local green spaces.
Right, $10 million is huge, but then the public response just completely overwhelmed the system.
Yeah, people really showed up for this.
Over 20,000 people voted on this initiative. It forced the city to inject an extra $15 million.
Wait, so they more than doubled it just based on voter turnout?
Exactly. We're looking at a total investment of $25 million. And that's supplemented by LaSalle's own local participatory budget for specific projects like the Jardins Ensemble Collective Garden.
Jordan's Ensemble, meaning let's garden together.
Yeah. I mean, this is basically a giant municipal Kickstarter.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Citizens are just bypassing traditional top-down council spending and literally voting with their tax dollars to fund the exact biological upgrades they want on their streets.
And what's fascinating here is the economic friction of a participatory budget at this scale. That's where the real systemic changes happen.
Explain that a bit more. What do you mean by economic friction?
Well, when 20,000 citizens direct $25 million into ecological zones, they are essentially bypassing the traditional bureaucratic silos. The walls that usually separate parks and recreation from economic development.
Oh, I see. They're forcing those departments to merge their goal.
Exactly. This highly targeted investment generates a localized circular economy.
Right, because the money isn't leaving the borough.
Exactly. The capital isn't being handed to some massive multinational construction firm to build a highway overpass. It is being distributed locally to transform barren patches of public grass into thriving, engineered ecosystems.
So let's break down the mechanics of that circular economy. Because, a skeptic might look at this and say, okay, you spent $25 million on dirt and seeds. Where's the economic multiplier there?
It's a fair question from a traditional economic standpoint.
Right. But the source documents explicitly note that these targeted public investments fundamentally alter the surrounding real estate dynamics.
Mhm.
We are seeing a measurable shift in how value is perceived in the neighborhood.
The multiplier effect happens on multiple fronts here. First, the funds pay for local materials, local organizers, and local infrastructure.
So keeping capital strictly within the borough.
Exactly. Second, the food produced actively offsets grocery costs for participating residents, which directly increases their disposable income.
Wow, so the literal cost of living reduction.
It is. And third, and perhaps most significant for the municipal tax base, integrating these beautifully maintained ecological zones into a neighborhood actually increases the attractiveness of the area.
And thereby the perceived value of the surrounding real estate.
Exactly. The residents demanded this specific infrastructure, and the local economy is responding to the improved quality of life that these green corridors provide.
Okay, so now that we understand the $25 million weight behind this, let's look at how this money actually manifests in the dirt. Because LaSalle hasn't just implemented a one-size-fits-all farming model, right?
No, they've been very strategic about it.
They have created distinct zoning philosophies depending on how a resident wants to interact with the food system.
It's a fascinating spatial decoding of the land.
Yeah, it's heavily divided between community gardens on one hand and collective gardens on the other.
And understanding the sociological distinction between those two models is vital. It's the key to understanding the borough's overarching resilience strategy.
Because they solve different problems, right?
They are engineered to solve entirely different urban problems, yes.
Let's start with the community gardens. These are essentially the individual autonomy model. They are divided into private plots for the summer cultivation of, vegetables, herbs, flowers.
And the sources note that these plots are highly coveted.
Oh, massively. The waiting lists are getting longer and longer, like locations at Charles Nagy on LaSalle Boulevard or Darapedes near the Aqueduct Canal. They're packed.
It's premium real estate for gardeners.
Exactly. If we look at the urban design, community gardens are a bit like renting your own private studio apartment for your tomatoes, or like giving every resident their own personal off-grid solar panel.
I like that analogy.
Right. You have total control over your little plot, you do all the physical labor yourself, and you reap the individual caloric reward. It solves the problem of a resident wanting to grow their own food, but lacking a private backyard.
The collective gardens, however, operate on a completely different philosophy.
Yeah, talk about the collective side.
So these are the planter boxes and shared spaces where citizens, community organizations, and local partners share the tasks, the responsibilities, and ultimately the harvest.
So it's much more communal.
Very much so. The documents list key locations managed by heavily embedded local groups. For instance, you have the greenhouse on LaFleur Avenue and Park Menard. Both are managed by NutriCenter LaSalle.
Okay, and there are others too, right?
Yes. You have the former Allian School Courtyard, which is managed by a group called Allionu, and the Promenade Lionel Boya.
And the Jardinons Ensemble project at Parc Darapedes that we mentioned earlier?
Exactly, which is co-managed by Ecoquartier LaSalle and Heritage Laurentian.
So if the community garden is that individual solar panel, the collective garden is like living in a big cooperative house where everyone shares the chores and the meals. It's a massive interconnected microgrid.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. It is social infrastructure disguised as agriculture.
Wow. Social infrastructure disguises agriculture.
Yes, because the collective model is deliberately engineered to break down urban social isolation. By outsourcing the management to organizations like NutriCenter LaSalle, the borough is transforming public parks into open-air classrooms.
So it's about education just as much as food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are bringing together residents of different generations, different cultural backgrounds, and varying socioeconomic statuses to perform a shared physical task.
That's pretty rare in a modern city.
It is. The act of sharing agricultural knowledge, Sharing the labor of cultivation and then sharing the physical harvest builds a complex safety net of civic relationships.
So the borough isn't just funding the growth of root vegetables.
No, they are funding community resilience against future social or supply chain shocks.
Man, that brings us to the most radical element of the PLDCN, because organized gardens, whether they are your private plot or a highly organized shared planter box, they still require you to actively want to be a farmer, right?
Right. You have to opt in.
Exactly. But LaSalle is pushing this into the wilder public spaces of the city. We are looking at a deliberate strategy to normalize urban foraging.
This is a huge leap. This is the transition from enclosed, specialized garden spaces to an open, decentralized urban orchard.
Which just sounds so crazy for a major city.
Well, the sheer logistics of this shift challenge fundamental assumptions about what a city park is supposed to do.
Yeah. So the $25 million participatory budget heavily funded these ecological nourishing zones, which are basically self-serve public spaces featuring small fruit-bearing trees and shrubs at places like Parc J.D. Ducharme and Parc de l'Aqueduc.
Right, entirely self-serve.
But beyond those specific zones, the borough is actively scattering actual fruit trees, apples, pears, cherries across normal, everyday public parks like Park Lita Graydon.
Which is right there in the open.
Okay, look, here is where I have to push back on the municipal reality of this plan.
I had a feeling you might.
I mean, the utopian vision of a resident plucking a perfect pear while walking their dog sounds incredible. It really does. But anyone who has ever owned a fruit tree knows the gritty logistical nightmare they create.
They can be a handful, sure.
We are talking about wasps, pests, and literally thousands of rotting plums fermenting on public sidewalks.
It does paint a vivid picture.
Right. Historically, public works departments plant sterile, non-fruit-bearing trees, precisely because fruiting trees cost a fortune in unionized street sweeper hours. They create massive liability and sanitation headaches.
That's been the prevailing logic for a century, yes.
So how is LaSalle justifying the literal mess of an urban orchard? It feels like a policy that looks great in a planning document, but fails the moment the fruit drops.
It's a very valid concern. Those concerns regarding municipal maintenance and liability are the exact reasons urban landscapes have remained ecologically sterile for so long.
Right? It's just easier to maintain.
Exactly. However, the underlying logic of LaSalle's local ecological transition plan is a calculated rejection of that sterile, low-maintenance model.
So they know it's going to be messy.
They do. The administration is making a deliberate mathematical calculation here. They believe the ecosystem services provided by a fruiting urban canopy far outweigh the increased sanitation costs.
Wow.
They are trying to aggressively normalize local food accessibility and promote urban biodiversity. So a certain amount of rotting fruit is absorbed as just the necessary cost of operating a self-sustaining ecosystem.
A self-sustaining ecosystem that combats the urban heat island effect, right?
Exactly, while simultaneously providing free, hyperlocal calories to the population.
So they are actively choosing ecological friction over industrial efficiency.
Beautifully put, yes.
And they aren't stopping at the park boundaries either, which is where this plan gets incredibly pervasive. The borough is heavily promoting a program called Arbre pour mon quartier.
Which translates to a tree for my neighborhood.
Right. And this allows private homeowners to purchase subsidized fruit trees at a massively reduced price, sometimes even including the installation, just to green their own residential lots.
This is a brilliant tactical move by the borough.
Because it spreads the orchard everywhere.
Exactly. By heavily subsidizing the private installation of fruit trees alongside the public foraging zones, the borough is effectively blurring the line between public infrastructure and private property.
So it's all just one big food zone.
They are weaving a continuous, uninterrupted ecological corridor across the entire map of LaSalle. Birds, pollinators, and human foragers can move seamlessly through a food environment that doesn't respect property lines.
It fundamentally shifts the culture of the resident, doesn't it? You stop being a passive park goer who complains that the city hasn't swept up the fallen apples.
Right.
And you become an active urban forager who harvests the apples before they can even hit the ground. You are actively living inside the food system rather than just observing it.
And the success of this entire paradigm relies entirely on that psychological shift.
If people don't pick the fruit, it fails.
Exactly. If the residents don't adopt the identity of urban foragers, the project collapses under the weight of its own unharvested produce. The infrastructure only works if the population learns how to interact with it.
Which brings us to the urgency of why we are diving into municipal zoning and pear trees today.
The clock is ticking.
It is. All of these converging elements, the 25 million in citizen-directed funding, the complex network of collective gardens breaking down social isolation, the controversial urban orchards, they are all hurtling toward a master plan that requires immediate listener attention.
Right, because we are not examining a completed historical project here.
Yeah.
We are looking at a live public policy window.
It's happening right now.
Yes. The overwhelming demand for community plots proves that the citizens want to alter their relationship with the land. But the overarching blueprint for how that happens across the entire territory is still being written.
Crucially, the Borough of LaSalle is right in the middle of a massive public consultation phase to finalize this roadmap.
And they need the public's input to make it work.
Exactly. The PLDCN is trying to forge a food system that is equitable, resilient, and deeply rooted in the community. But they need the data to map that food reality we discussed at the top of the show.
We can't do it blindly.
Right. Citizens have until September 20, 2026 to participate via an official survey. And since today is August 17th, 2026, you listening to this have just over a month to actually shape the caloric future of the city.
This raises an important question, though, about the requirement for public consultation.
How so?
Well, the need for it in mapping a food reality cannot be overstated. A top-down agricultural plan implemented by city bureaucrats will absolutely fail if it doesn't align with the specific cultural, nutritional, and spatial needs of the neighborhoods it serves.
Because the bureaucrats don't know who wants what vegetables.
Precisely. The city can provide the subsidized trees and the $25 million, but the residents must provide the granular block-by-block data.
Like where the food deserts are.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what types of crops the community actually knows how to cultivate and where the collective resources are most urgently needed.
And this isn't just about LaSalle either. I mean, even if you don't live in Montreal, the mechanics of this plan represent a blueprint for how you can interact with your own local government.
It really is a universal lesson.
It demands that we fundamentally rethink our civic identity in the 21st century. For decades, the role of the urban citizen has been, entirely passive and consumer-driven.
You just pay and consume.
Right, you pay your municipal taxes, the city paves the roads and cuts the grass in the park, and you purchase your food from a consolidated corporate grocery store that relies on fragile global supply chains.
But involvement in these highly localized ecological spaces shatters that passive consumer model entirely.
It forces you to participate.
Exactly. Whether you are filling out that strategic survey by September 20th, or taking on a leadership role in a collective garden at Park Menard, or just utilizing a municipal subsidy to plant a pear tree in your front yard, your perception of your living environment changes.
You transition from being a taxpayer who consumes city services to becoming a steward of the land who actively produces city services.
That's the core of it. When you have physical agency over the food feeding your neighborhood, your investment in soil quality, water management, and local biodiversity becomes deeply personal.
It's your food on the line.
Yes. The city is no longer just a concrete grid you reside in. It becomes a biological ecosystem you are responsible for maintaining.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. We started by tracking a massive $25 million participatory budget, which is just an undeniable flex of citizen political will that forced the city to prioritize green infrastructure over gray concrete.
A monumental shift in funding.
Truly. We explored the complex urban design behind community gardens serving individual autonomy versus collective gardens operating as vital social infrastructure.
The open-air classrooms.
Yeah. And we debated the messy, radical realities of ecological nourishing zones and urban orchards and how subsidizing private trees creates a continuous urban food grid.
Blurring those property lines.
Exactly. And it all points toward the critical September 20 deadline, where citizens have the power to permanently codify this food reality into the municipal DNA.
The documents from LaSalle provide a remarkable, actionable framework for the future of urban resilience.
They really do.
But I want to leave you with a final concept to mull over. A logical endpoint to everything we've analyzed today.
I'm all ears.
If an entire borough can successfully map its food reality, overcome the bureaucratic friction of participatory budgets, and turn its public spaces into a decentralized foraging farm, what happens to the future of urban planning?
Okay, where are you going with this?
Well, we currently zone cities based on commercial, industrial, or residential uses, right?
Right.
But what if, 50 years from now, cities are zoned by their caloric output?
Oh, wow.
Imagine the architectural and social implications if every newly designed public park, and every new condo development was legally required to possess the biological capacity to feed its surrounding residents in the event of a crisis.
Zoning by calories instead of concrete. Now that permanently flips the construction crane metaphor right on its head.
It certainly does.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the LaSalle agricultural revolution. Stay curious, keep interrogating the infrastructure of your own urban environments, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for watching this video. For more news and in-depth reports, visit wikiresidents.ca. All our content is available in text and audio formats across all your devices. Please feel free to share your comments with us.